Hello, in this case, I would want us to create the pivot table. So this is part 2 of the pivot tables. So if you have not actually seen part 1, make sure you actually check on part 1. Now, in this part 2 here, I will create a pivot table. But before we actually create a pivot table, why are we actually trying to use a pivot table and Excel itself as the functions and the formulas? So what's actually the need for us to create a pivot table? I mean, Excel has the formulas and the functions, and in this point you can also create a table like this and you use the tables to do the filtering. So if you actually need the results for the fruits alone, then you deselect the vegetables like that, then okay. So if all this can be done inside the tables and we can still use the Excel functions to obtain the totals, yes, why are we actually trying to use the pivot tables again? So let me actually bring back the vegetables. So we are actually using the pivot tables because the pivot tables will actually get you the summary of your data without you having to use those formulas and the functions. So even without the knowledge of the formulas and the functions, you can still work on the pivot tables. That's actually one of the biggest advantages of using the pivot tables. You do not have to master the formulas and the functions here. No, you just have to drag and drop and it will obtain for you the summary of your data. So you can summarize your data in any kind of a way that you want. So let's actually see. So you click inside your data like that. Then inside the insert tab, we have what you call the tables group. And inside that tables group, we have what you call the pivot table. So you click on the pivot table there. It will ask you, select a table or a range. In this point here, this one has actually been selected for us, but allow me to actually cancel this first. So after we actually created a table here, we can actually get a table name for this. So you can get yourself into the table design, and inside the table design, we have what you call the table name. So let's actually call this one PVT, pivot tables, PVT like that. Hit enter on the keyboard. So it's now okay. So instead of us selecting the whole of this range again, we will actually be using the PVT, which is actually the table name for this range here. So let's now create the pivot table. So inside the insert tab, we have the tables group, and inside the tables group, we have the pivot table. Click on it like that. It will ask you create pivot table, which is actually okay. Choose the data that you would want to analyze. Select a table or a range. So table or a range in my case is actually PVT. Yes, that's actually the name of my range here. It's actually the PVT. And in my case, I would actually want us to choose a new worksheet where that pivot table will be created. So the pivot table will actually be created in a new worksheet. So you can also choose this existing worksheet. You can also click on existing worksheet and pick on allocation. Let's say, for example, this point here. But in my case, allow me to actually pick a new worksheet. So a sheet will actually be added here to be sheet 2. And in that sheet 2, that's where we'll be having the pivot table. So new worksheet, then hit on OK. So you can check down here, we have sheet 2 to the left. So to the left of our source data, we have sheet 2, which actually contains our pivot table. Now, you can actually realize that there's a difference when I click inside this pivot table and when I actually click outside. So if I click outside, you can actually check that I have the normal Excel tabs there, from the file tab all the way to the power pivot tab. But if I click inside the pivot table, you can actually check that I have some added 2 tabs, the pivot table analyze tab and the design tab. So 2 added tabs. So now, so in this point, you will realize that we have what you call the pivot table fields. What is a pivot table field? So if in your data here, you add about 5 column headings, let's say from the order ID to the country, in the Excel sheet, we actually call these ones the column headings. But inside the pivot table, we actually call that one the pivot table field. So that's actually a field. The column heading in the Excel sheet is actually a field when it comes to the pivot table. That's why you are actually checking that we have the order ID, we have the product, we have the category, we have the amount, we have the date, and we have the country. And by default, their order will actually be based on the source data. So you can actually check that in the source data. The first one is actually the order ID and the last one is actually the country. Check the order from the order ID to the country. And in the pivot table fields there, you can check that from the order ID all the way to the country. So the order has actually been kept. So the order that you will actually get inside the pivot table fields is the same order that you actually had inside the column headings. But remember, you can always have this order arranged. Let's say, for example, you would like to sort in the A to Z order. So you click on this point here for the settings and you can check sort from A to Z. So you can click on it like that. Now you can check that I have amount, category, country, date, order ID, then the product. You can also click on the other point there, that is sort in data source order. Data source order means the source data. The source data is actually what we actually had inside the table there. You can actually check that it's the order ID all the way to the country. So if you like to sort in that order, so you can just click in sort in data source order. Now you can actually check that it's what you actually had. Now before we actually check on the pivot table fields arrangement, I would urge you to subscribe to this YouTube channel and also consider following me on my X account so that you can build one of the biggest data analysis platforms together. Also, you can consider checking my work here. So if you actually need some work on the templates, I can actually design for you the templates, manage it for you, and deliver on time at just $50 every month. So this is actually a monthly retainer, $50 every month for that work. I can also do the one-time task, for example, the ultimate business dashboard designs. That's for the templates, personal finance and budget trackers templates, the inventory management system templates, the AI-powered reporting templates, HR and payroll tracker templates, sales performance tracker templates. All this work, you can actually check that the prices are fair, from $19, $12, $17, $22, $19, and $15. Down here, you can also check that I'll be accepting the projects from your end. So we also have a monthly retainer here for the monthly subscription. So if you need the dashboards, the charts, automation, pivot tables and the models, Power BI, financial forecast, templates management, all that work every month at just $550. And for the one-time task, let's say the AI-powered dashboard designs, it will go at $150. The AI data analysis and insights, it will go at $200. The AI automation and smart macros, it will go at $250. And finally, the AI enhanced Power BI reports, it will actually be going at $300. All the prices are actually fair. And if you would also want to access my courses on my Google Drive, my website is actually on hold a bit, but it will be back very soon. So if you still want to access all these courses, that's AI in BI, AI in Excel, core visualization, all the way up to the last course there, which is actually on formulas and functions, all this will be available to you at $100. So you will be added into the Google Drive account, and when the website is actually back, your access will actually be shifted to the website. So your access is actually lifetime. So imagine accessing all these courses at $100 when the deal is actually going at $945. That's actually insane. So to get in touch with me, this is actually my email. So email me here so that we can talk on the projects. Now I'll actually want to address something here. That's the pivot table fields arrangement. So this order here is what we always call the side by side. Side by side meaning we have the fields here and what you call the drag fields. So this is the fields or the column headings that you actually had inside the Excel source data. And these ones here are what you call the drag fields. So side by side. We also have option 2, which is always what you call the stacked. Click on the stacked and now you can actually check that we have the fields on top, then the drag fields at the bottom. But I always prefer the side by side because when it comes to the stacked format, you can check that I have to scroll. So all the fields are not actually visible because my source data actually had several column headings. So all the fields are not actually visible. So to have everything visible, you just have to go side by side. That is fields section and areas section side by side. That's it. So this is the fields section and this is actually the areas section. So the fields section actually contains the fields and the areas section actually contains the drag fields. So that's it for the pivot table part 2. Let's also check on the pivot table part 3 in the next video.